All right, Jay, we had a little bit of a breaking news while we were recording tonight. We were going to get in some more NFL stuff, but instead, breaking news from ESPN, Adrian Wojnarowski reports that John Wall of the Washington Wizards, hadn't seen him in a while, but he has been traded to the Houston Rockets for Russell Westbrook. A first-round pick was also attached with Wall going to Houston, and Westbrook is coming over apparently by himself or with limited return in capital. So this was a trade we thought might happen. I know we had talked about that a while back when we were talking about the Rockets, but it's been quiet for about 2 or 3 weeks. But it does look like Houston's getting Russ out of town, and it could have some big implications. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. What's your initial reaction to all this?
Well, my initial reaction is I'm very pleased that this is taking place because I enjoy being right. This is what I suspected would occur when we heard the rumblings about the relationship between James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Westbrook, having the concerns about guys not being held accountable. James Harden, thinking, well, I think my tenure in Houston has run its course. I don't think I can win a championship here anymore. And of course, the prelude to all this was the dismissal of Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey leaving town. So that was, you look at those type of things, and then you look at the major personalities on this team, and I thought to me the Robert Covington trade was very telling. To me, Robert Covington, you could argue that maybe he was the third most important player on that team. He's a guy that you brought in mid-season last year in the Clint Capella deal, and a very good player, 3-and-D type dude, got defensive versatility. Really was a key cog in the small ball experiment that they attempted to run. And in the regular season, it had its success, and then in the semifinals against the Lakers, they got exposed, as we suspected they would. But this is when you look at this trade initially, I suspected this is what Houston would wind up doing, even though as time has worn on, I think we thought maybe if it was going to happen, it would have happened a little bit quicker. But when you look at Washington, maybe Washington, in fact, could have been in the same boat. Think about the relationship between John Wall and Bradley Beal. I mean, we haven't seen John Wall in, it seems like, 2 years since he played on the basketball court. And then the injuries that he has endured lately, and seemingly, Bradley Beal is kind of taking center stage of that team. Bradley Beal is a fantastic basketball player in his own right. When those two guys were growing up together, you thought it would be one of the best backcourts in basketball for years to come. They never quite, in their younger years, could reach the potential maybe we thought they could have had. They never made it Eastern Conference Finals, and you combine that with John Wall's injuries, and you feel like you've been let down, so to speak, because their talent would suggest they could have maybe gotten that together and accomplished more than they had have. But I think maybe with the way Bradley Beal has developed into seemingly a star player himself, you remember when John Wall was healthy and the guy, John Wall was the face of that team. And I don't know if maybe there's some relationship issues there, because we know how big those things do matter in this players' league, which is the NBA. And now what you have is maybe you have two teams that get together with two point guards who seemingly in their current environment, or they're not happy. Maybe the teams are not happy, and they say, well, we got two displeased point guard. Maybe we do this swap here. And Houston gets a first-round pick. Maybe that is the deciding factor. I think definitely Washington, you look at them, they get better. You could make I think you'd kind of be foolish to make the argument that Washington doesn't reap the immediate benefits from this trade. But at the same time, I don't know if Russell Westbrook moves the needle dramatically. I think Washington immediately becomes a playoff team. I think that's very realistic, especially in the Eastern Conference. But I don't think it dramatically changes the face of the Eastern Conference. I mean, Russell Westbrook coming over, it doesn't tell me that. I mean, you're not going to throw Washington up there with Milwaukee immediately. You're not going to do it with Brooklyn. You're not going to do it with Boston, Miami. I don't know. Maybe if you keep going down the line, maybe you could talk me into a 6 seed, maybe. I don't know. I think still Toronto and Indiana, you'd have to contend with them as well. But then on the other side, Houston, they get that pick. And you could also look at, I don't know how good Washington can be as we continue to probably most likely witness the decline of Russell Westbrook, because he no longer has an effective jump shot. And as he continues to age, and Father Time continues to catch up to him, as it inevitably will, his athleticism will erode, and he won't be a viable starting point guard anymore. Now we're not there yet, but I anticipate that is where we will be headed. Now on the other side, John Wall, it could be the same thing. We don't know what to expect with John Wall. So obviously, it's some bit of a risk. I don't know, and this is very interesting because you look at Russell Westbrook and John Wall, similar type guys in my estimation. I mean, you look at their careers, how they play the game. Russell Westbrook, to me, he's had a better career. He's got more star power, maybe a little bit more explosion. Maybe you look at John Wall, he's got a little more straight line speed. But they're very similar players, but I don't know, trading for a player that similar, does that really change the outlook for James Harden? I think you could maybe. I think Houston is a real possibility that you could still move James Harden, because I think you've taken, like I said, Washington reaps the immediate benefit. I don't think it's a reasonable expectation to think John Wall is coming to Houston. He's going to make them a better team immediately. And John Wall's 30 years of age himself. I mean, he could be looking at the same thing because he's never had an elite jump shot. He's never been that type of guy. So I think it's absolutely a fascinating development that we've witnessed. I think it's the first time we've ever had this sort of breaking news. I mean, we just cut from our last segment and just all of a sudden saw this pop up. So what a wonderful time to be in these seats and discussing this development. And of course, as I'll end with where I started, I am absolutely pleased as punch that I was right about this.
Yeah, this is surprising, because if you think just 10, it's surprising not that we didn't think it was coming, but if you think just 10 days ago, the Washington Wizards general manager came on and he was like, he had an ESPN article. He's like, look, we're not trading Wall. We're good. We're great. We're all great. We're all looking forward to the season, and we're all Wizards, and we're in this together, and this and that, and then just, oh, oops, by the way, like if you go to the Wizards news, like on ESPN, you'll see Wall traded, and then the next story is we're not trading Wall. 9 days ago. It's comical, to say the least. It's like a freezing cold take in real time. But yeah, okay, so we haven't seen John Wall since December 26th of 2018. In the 2 seasons before that, like you said, he had significant injuries. To quote it, he played 41 games in the 2017-18 season, and he played in 32 games in the season after that. And then, of course, he's been out since then with multiple injuries. He had an injury on the court, and he had something in his bathtub or something. Like, he's been out forever. And it was right around the time he had just inked that huge contract extension, and he's pretty much been getting paid to do nothing for the last 2 years. While Bradley Beal has blossomed into a full star. I mean, he was averaging 30 points a game this past season. And I think the Wizards essentially said, look, he's a little bit younger than you. He's 27. You're on the wrong side of 30 at this point. And he's here, and he does stuff, and he produces, and he shows up. And I mean, at some point, there's being out for a little while, and then you haven't been really available in 3 seasons. Legitimately, 2016 was your last full season where you put up he was scoring 23 points a game, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, and about 5 rebounds per game. John Wall was a dude when he was the dude, but it's been a while. I mean, where have you been, type thing? And I can't blame the Wizards for wanting to maybe shift a little bit more towards Bradley Beal. I don't know why John Wall finds that appalling. It's not like you tore your ACL and in 9 months they said, okay, we're moving on from you. Sorry. It's silly to me, but apparently the original reports of, hey, John Wall's not happy and he wants out, which sparked this whole conversation to begin with, were apparently true, despite what the GM said. So, I guess don't listen to these guys that run these teams until, the thing does or doesn't happen. But you're right. Though, in essence, what you're looking at is a contract. Not only are these remarkably similar players in their play style of having, limited ability to have their own jump shot, and kind of they're real spotty with that, but they do have that athleticism, that explosiveness, they play the same position. But their contracts are, within the time left, are almost identical. I mean, Russell Westbrook is going to make $41 million this year, 44, and then 47 in the final year of his contract. John Wall, 41, 44, 47. The contracts are actually almost identical in terms of the last 3 years of their deal, despite being signed at different times. It's kind of how they all worked out, which is, again, remarkable on its own. But what I find interesting is that a first round pick was attached to John Wall. So the Rockets, I guess the Rockets were able to get something back for Russell Westbrook, besides like an even swap of a player, which is surprising to me. I didn't think that Russell Westbrook contract was worth all that much. I mean, at this point, Russell Westbrook is a little older than Wall, and you haven't really seen it yet, but there's subtle hints that Westbrook may be starting on that decline, and we know with guys like him, it's a cliff. Once you start, yeah, that's it. And it's surprising that the Houston Rockets were able to not only get Wall but get a first round pick. And the Wizards may still not be all that great. I mean, they may not be a lottery team, but they're not going to definitely be like in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's going to be a decent draft pick. So that does surprise me that they were able to get something back along with Westbrook. I surmise they were probably going to have to dump something with Westbrook to get rid of him. But I think like you kind of alluded to, what does it mean for going forward with these teams? Are the Wizards clearly don't appear that they're going to be blowing it up. And now this roster isn't amazing. You run it down. You have Westbrook, Beal, Davis Bertans, Rui Hachimura from draft or two ago, Thomas Bryant filling in there at center. And then the bench really, I mean, Robin Lopez is hanging out, but it's not like a ton on this bench that like jumps out like, oh man, like they're not really a stacked team, but that starting five to me in the East, especially in the bottom half of the East, should be competitive. And they should be a decent team. We know Russell Westbrook can still do some fun stuff. I mean, he was doing some fun stuff in Houston with James Harden. My question really is more about the Rockets. We know that the Wizards aren't blowing it up anymore, but what are the Rockets doing? Is this going to be enough for James Harden? Is this going to keep him around? Is he still going to want to be traded? And if that's the case, then why would you trade for John Wall in the first place? Why wouldn't you try to get picks or assets for Russell Westbrook? Why bring him in? So maybe it does lend to the credence of they are going to try to make it work with James Harden. And maybe tell Harden, dude, we're not trading you. Just enjoy it. I mean,
and I don't, this is just, instant reaction. What I think,
right.
This could be just a long range ploy to just stockpile assets by the Houston Rockets. Because I for one don't see a John Wall James Harden thing being all that good.
It's interesting.
I really don't think about it. I think it is interesting, but think about it. John Wall is a pure point guard, and at the top of his game, he was one of the I think top 5 point guards in this game at his peak. And when you think about that, he's got to have the ball because it's the same thing as Russell Westbrook, but John Wall is a pure point guard and more of a pure point guard, I think, than Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook is also an elite scorer. John Wall can put the ball in the basket, but he's not – I don't think he's as dynamic a scorer as Russell Westbrook. So for John Wall to be effective and be a factor, he needs the ball. He has to have the ball. And as a point guard, I think he's going to want that. I think it's going to be difficult. I think that's going to be a difficult thing to work out between John Wall and James Harden. So my suspicion is this could be a long-range ploy to continue to stockpile assets and picks. I think Houston could still be working and angling to get James Harden out of there, and that's gonna be a haul, no matter, because that's gonna require a lot of assets. And then you look at John Wall. So my thing about John Wall, I don't know if this is over. I don't think he has a big future in Houston. But if you roll John Wall out there and let him play, and John Wall shows you that he can play to some extent of what he was, Houston can move right off of him at the trade deadline this season and say, hey, we got a guy that can help you now. He's not a part of our future because we're on a full-on rebuild. So maybe if John Wall can come out there and perform, maybe they move him as well. And think about it. The trade that they just made, they got a first-round pick for it. So you look at maybe I think there's somewhat of an argument, and maybe you're looking at, I'm surprised that Washington gave up a first-round pick. But John Wall, to me, I think at face value, it looks like somewhat of an even swap for swap. But John Wall hasn't played at all, so there's a great unknown of what he's going to look like.
Right.
So with that, I think it's a little bit more even than maybe you think. But I do think, and I don't know for a fact, but I think if I'm thinking how was Raphael Stone, I think that's the Rockets general manager now.
Yeah.
If he's thinking like I'm thinking, he's playing the real long game, because if you really are serious about blowing this thing up, you got to get Harden out of there. If John Wall can play, then you get. I think you move him as well, and you just stockpile picks, and you prepare for a big time rebuild. That is my suspicion. That's what I think could be happening.
And thinking about it a little bit more, that could very well be. I mean, they did sign DeMarcus Cousins, which is like their only real, I think, sign of, hey, we still want to compete this year right now. But again, that's another guy
that's another real unknown.
Yeah, you're
And
chasing. You might start be chasing a mirage of DeMarcus Cousins at this point with all the injuries he's had, which sucks because he's a fun dude when he's healthy. But I mean, if you look at the rest of their moves, they got another first from Robert Covington, so they've got some assets already. Yep. Maybe they are still, because I can't imagine they said, hey James, what if we get John Wall for you? I mean, it's like
exactly.
Well, that's what I already had, So maybe they are, but maybe he is able to. Maybe John Wall is ready for a change of scenery, and they can get him back and healthy, and he's playing some good ball, and they slip him. Maybe it is so. So we'll stay tuned and maybe see if we get a James Harden trade before this topic and the next. We'll see.